I'm feeling kind of spaced right now. Not really. Architecture of space. We'll talk about some aspects of this. Wanted to discuss briefly in this session the directions that govern space and the nature of centers and crossroads and labyrinths and the like, and wilderness space, or what sometimes is called liminal or boundary space, and how this relates to the church. But first of all, I need to say that the Old Testament takes place within a world which has three sets of directions in it: east and west, north and south, up and down. And this is all over the Old Testament, and again, because of our overly intellectualized approach to theology, we want to do theology without doing directions. But as soon as you start to read the Old Testament, you start being aware that you're moving from place to place, you're given the names of locations, and after a while you begin to pick up that some of these are east-west, some are north-south, and some are up and down. So I want us to think about these things a little bit. If we become conscious of this, in a general way, it begins to inform how we think about the space that we would make in which to worship God and in which to signify the worship of God. Okay? And we're not just going to slavishly imitate the Old Testament stuff on this, because after all, we live in a new covenant. We now have access to the Holy of Holies. We're all gathered at a feast that people were largely excluded from in the Old Testament. So there are a lot of changes that would take place. But still, the New Testament is written to people who are thoroughly acquainted with the Old Testament. Nobody in the New Testament churches hardly anybody in the New Testament churches is a convert from paganism. Paul's letters are never written to people who a couple of years before were worshiping idols. The Gentiles in these churches were all Gentile God-fearers who were in the synagogues, and the rest of the people in the churches were Jews. The Corinthian church was made up of all these people that were in the Corinthian synagogue and became Christians and moved right next door. And all the problems in the Corinthian church, none of them have anything to do with the influence of paganism. All those problems have to do with the coming of the new covenant and people being too excited. For the first time, we can drink wine with God, so they were drinking too much of it. You know, we're not under the ceremonial laws anymore, so since the rules about incest are in the middle of Leviticus, they didn't know what to do when they had a man committing incest. Paul had to say, now wait a minute, those parts still pertain. All the problems that you read about there are problems that come from moving from the Old Testament to the New and all the wonderful new glories, and then those things being taken to excess. So if we want to understand the New Testament information, the best thing we can do is become thoroughly steeped in the Old Testament revelation. Now you can read the New Testament and get stuff out of it without knowing the Old Testament all that well, but you're going to miss all kinds of stuff if you don't, because it was written to people who spent every Saturday spending 4 or 5 hours in the synagogue learning the text of the Old Testament. These were Torah fanatics. You know, they didn't say the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. They said Torah, Torah, Torah. That became a problem. Paul said, you got too much Torah going on here. All right? So that's who the New Testament's written to. And if you want to be the kind of person who can understand the New Testament, you better become one of those. It would help a lot. Which means, if we want to understand the New Testament gospel information, one of the things we want to learn about is east and west, north and south. Now you see, Adam and Eve were kicked out to the east side of the Garden of Eden. And then, after Cain sinned in the land, Cain moved out farther east to the land of Nod, or the land of wanderings. And after Adam and Eve were kicked out to the east, when Cain and Abel, at about 130 years of age, they and their clans came to worship God, it says they brought offerings to the Lord. We know they were about 130 because the next child to be born was Seth when Adam and Eve were 130 years of age. So they would have had lots of kids in between, but Seth is the replacement for Abel, who had died just at that time. So it's about, Cain is 29 and Abel's 127, and they've got their wives and their kids and their grandchildren and their whole clans with them when they come for this worship event in Genesis 4. Did you ever realize that? Or did you think that these were two 18-year-old kids who brought a sacrifice all by themselves? Which did you think? You thought the other one, didn't you? As you never noticed that this was at the year about 130 years after Adam and Eve were made, see? No, when Cain goes out, he takes his whole clan with him, and they were able to build a city. There's a couple of hundred people there at these worship events. So they come, and see, they're moving back toward the west, near the Garden of Eden, where the cherubim are with their flaming swords, and that's where they're bringing their offerings. This is geographical east-west movement. Well, after the flood, it says, as they journeyed east, they came to the plain of Shinar, and they built the Tower of Babel. Again, moving away from God. God is pictured as being in the west, and moving away from God is pictured as being in the east. Well, not just that east-west axis takes place in the Old Testament, but so does a north-south axis. Okay? Abram comes from this eastern area, and he comes back from Ur of the Chaldees, back from the Tower of Babel zone, making a westward movement into the Promised Land. But he comes by way of the north. He goes up to Haran, and he comes in from the north. Then there's a famine, so he goes down to Egypt, to the south. He comes back up from the south. Okay? So we start having a north-south thing going on here. And Joseph and Jacob descended down into Egypt. So we have a down-up motion. You always go down to Egypt. And you always come up from Egypt. True. I'm not making it up. I didn't write the Bible. You don't go down to the land of Paddan Aram. Jacob doesn't go down to Laban and then come up from the land of Syria. But you always go down to Egypt, and you come up from Egypt. Up and down, east and west, north and south. You've got to pay attention to it. Okay? They come to Elijah in 1 Kings chapters 1 and 2. Okay? It says Elijah is up on a hill. So the king sends to Beelzebub to get information. The Baal-zebub, the Baal of the flies, to get information, because he has fallen down out of a lattice and is wounded and goes up on a sick bed. So they go to Elijah, and Elijah is up on a hill. And he comes and he meets the men who are going to Baal-zebub, the lord of the flies, and says, go back to the king and tell him he's not going to come down off of the sick bed to which he has gone up. And so when they come to the king, and the king said, what did the lord of the flies have to say? They say, oh, we met this prophet, and he told us to come back. And he said, what did he look like? He said, well, he was a man of hair. He was a Baal of hair, a lord of hair. And that doesn't mean he was a hairy guy. It means he was a Nazarite, okay? Had long hair. And he says, oh, that's Elijah. Well, you tell Elijah to come here and tell me. So he sends 50 men, and Elijah is on a top of a hill. So the 50 men go up to Elijah. And they say, oh, Ish of God, fire of God, flame of God, come down. And Elijah says, if I'm an Ish of God, hey, why just me? I have a lot of fire. So Ish of God, lots of fire comes down and consumes the 50 men. And then another 50 men go up. And they say, man of God, come down. You starting to get this up and down thing that's going on here? I'm just repeating the passage. Finally, Elijah comes down. He says, the bed on which you have gone up, you will not come down from until you die. Then he goes away. The next chapter, they're making a journey, Elijah and Elisha, and the prophets meet him and say, do you know that your master will be taken off of your head today? Up and down, up and down. They go up into the mountains. Elisha comes back down. Up and down. You say, well, there's no chapter in the Westminster Confession on up and down-attitudinousness. So I don't need to worry about it. Well, you don't need to worry about it, but it'd be a good thing to take notice of. The Bible has a lot to say about this, all right? There's a whole history of it. In Leviticus 1, if we look at the sacrifices that are offered here, right here in Leviticus 1, we can see, let's see, where is that? Page 145. These are the Ascension Offerings, what your Bible calls burnt offering, but it means to go up, to ascend, Ascension Offerings. Well, first of all, if you bring an animal from the herd, a son of the herd, you have to kill your son. You sinned and your son has to die. That's the message here in verse 5. He shall slay the son of the herd in front of the Lord. Well, where is that? Well, the Lord is right here, enthroned in the tabernacle, and in front of him is right here. So the bull is slain on the east side, and then its blood is brought from east to west and splashed on the altar, and then its chopped up pieces are brought from east to west and put inside the altar and converted to smoke, which then ascends up to God. Okay? Now, if you bring a sheep or a goat, it's different. It's Seth. It doesn't saith now. S-A-I-D is said. S-A-I-T-H is Seth. It's Seth. In verse 11, if his offering is from the flock or the sheep or the goats, he shall slay it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. So, if you have a sheep, you slay it up here on the north, and its blood is brought from north to south and splashed on the altar, and its meat hunks are brought from north to south and put inside the altar. So the bull moves from east to west. The sheep and the goat move from north to south. Then you can also, every time I do this, I do it wrong. Okay? Forget about the bull. I lied to you. This is wrong on the tape. Not enough sleep last night. Let's go back. Let's go forward. In verse 14, if his offering to the Lord, if what he brings near, is an ascension of birds, it can be turtle doves or young pigeons, a son of the pigeons. And the priest shall bring it to the altar and wring off its head and offer it up in smoke and its blood. And verse 16, he will take away the crop with the feathers and cast it behind the altar eastward to the place of the ashes. Now this is how the bird travels. You kill the bird right here, and then you throw his hind feathers to the east, which means the bird is traveling from east to west. The bird travels this way. Now the ox, I was wrong. The ox can be killed anywhere out in here, and it goes up on the altar. The direction that the ox travels is from below to above. The direction the sheep travel is from north to south, and the direction the bird travels is from east to west. Now, is that important? Yeah, actually it is. The ox represents Moses and the leaders of Israel who led you up from Egypt. And so if you sin and fall out of grace, you need another Moses to lead you, someone who arises up out of the herd to lead you on the journey back to Sinai, which is what this altar is, the portable mountain. I know some of you don't believe me, but I have a 60-page paper out there on that table that proves all this. Okay, this is true. Now, if you fall out of Jacob's flock, you need to make the same journey Jacob made, which was from north to south, from Paddan Aram back into the land. And the birds, that was way back before there was any community. That's like Abraham by himself coming from east to west, from Ur to Chaldean. That's why these rituals are this way. You know what rituals are? Rituals are miniature representations of the founding events of any society. Or we can have a heavy-duty word. The heavy-duty word for this symbolic universe is microcosm. And the heavy-duty word for rituals is microchron. A miniaturized passage of time that repeats the events that are foundational to any society. Now that's what all rituals are. Whether you go to Pango Pango or to Bora Bora or to Bibo Bibo, you'll find that their rituals are repeating the foundational events that the gods used to bring about their society. And that's what these rituals do. The ox ritual, if you study it in detail, repeats the journey out of Egypt through the Red Sea and the washing to the mountain, led by Moses, who was a bull, an ox. Okay? If you study out the ritual of the sheep, it repeats Jacob and all of his flocks coming back into the land and crossing the river, making that journey from north to south. And if you look at the bird ritual, it repeats the journey at a symbolic level, the journey of Abraham moving this way. Now, I went through that just to try to reinforce to you that these directions are important in the Bible. Now, essentially, though, the movement is from west back to east. The garden was in the west. We moved out to the east. When we come back, the most important motion is this motion back here, coming in to the mountain of God and then moving up toward the throne of God. Okay? From east back to west. And out here is the Mediterranean Sea, and that's the edge. That's as far as you get. Okay, so right here, off this board, is the Mediterranean Sea. And we're never going to get farther than that till the New Testament. Okay? The Old Testament, bong, you're going to get here to the land, which is right up on the sea. That's the movement we're going to make. Okay? When we are cast into exile, what happens? Back to the east. We come back from exile. We come back this way. Who's in charge of us? Babylonians. Persians. Off to the east. When we get to the Greeks, the Greek empires in the book of Daniel are the king of the north and the king of the south. If I had my geography up here, you'd have the land of Palestine, you'd have Syria and Egypt, north and south, and that's it. Nobody ever gets anywhere out here. There's something else I want to show you, just in terms of sacred geography. This is all going somewhere. You're going to say, well, where is this going, Jim? Trust me. All right. According to Exodus chapter 38, the lampstand in the Holy of Holies has the 7 lamps positioned to watch over the table of showbread, or literally face bread. And these 12, there are loaves of bread that are round and flat like this, and they're called faces. How many face breads are there? 12. What do they symbolize? The tribes of Israel looking up at the lampstand. So these are watching each other. The lampstand watches over the bread looks back at the lampstand. Okay? So the lampstand is looking northwards, and the bread are looking southwards. Now, what about God's throne here? What direction is God's throne looking? Well, He sends the fire out to light the fire on the altar. So the throne is looking to the east, and when you bring the sacrifices in, they're traveling toward the west, moving to the throne. Now, I've got 4 animal faces here for you. The 4 faces of the cherubim. You got the ox face, the lion face, the eagle face, and the man face. Which of these is the altar face? Ox, lion, eagle, or man? Ox. So the ox makes the journey from east to west, and the ox faces out over here, looking out in this direction, which is exactly what Ezekiel 1 shows you. Now the throne is which animal? You all went to see The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Tell me now, which animal is the throne animal of David? Lion. I didn't hear you. Lion. All right, let's get some improvement here. So the lion is looking out this way. And which tribe is over here in the book of Numbers? Judah. Which tribe is over here? Ephraim. Now, this bread represents the tribes of Israel. So is this man or eagle? Man. The man face is over here, which is Reuben. And the eagle, then, is looking north. Now you say, is that what the Bible says? Yeah. You look at Ezekiel chapter 1 and chapter 9, and you look at where Ezekiel stands and where the four faces of the cherubim are, which never turn or move. You'll find that the eagle face is always looking north, the man face is looking south, the lion face is looking east, the ox face is looking west. Always. Now, these are the four cardinal constellations in the sky. Aquarius, the man who pours out water. That's what Reuben did. He poured out water into his father's concubine. He was unstable as water. Judah, the lion, Leo. The ox, Taurus. The eagle is associated with the scorpion on this side. This is a heavenly picture. Now, this shows you just how thoroughly oriented the tabernacle is. And you may say, well, I never thought about that before. Well, that's okay. But if you're an ancient Israelite and you were studying the law day and night and you were reflecting on Numbers chapter 2, where the tabernacle is laid out and the tribes are on the different sides, and you had the faces of the cherubim and you knew which sides they were on, and you were looking at these pieces of furniture here, the light that shines in this direction, the bread that looks in that direction, and you started thinking about things, you get this picture, okay? North, south, east, west, up, down. We didn't even look at the up and down part here. We could. You see, these white clouds here are all 5 cubits high, and there are posts that connect the white clouds. These posts have bronze sockets at the bottom that they're sitting into, and they have silver rings at the top. Okay, that's how they're made. Believe me, read it all in Exodus. The tabernacle is set, it's 10 cubits high, so it's 5 and then 10. Okay? It is made of boards that are set in silver sockets on the ground with gold at the top. So symbolically, this is 3 stories. We have 5, 5, and 5. There is a golden pole that runs down the middle which bisects the tabernacle itself. There's a tapestry that runs around the lower story here. There's four cubits, so there's a half a cubit on either side. It has cherubim on it. And there's another tapestry that runs along here at the upper story, 4 cubits with a half a cubit in between. It's got cherubim on it. Maybe I should have erased this. And then you've got the golden bar in between. So you've got 2 stories here. 5, 5, and 5. 1, 2, 3. It's vertical. And the picture is, you're out here at this altar here, surrounded by the white clouds. And then you move up into here. Now I really am going to have to erase this and show you how other vertical this is. And how in this architecture, if you could see it, the eye is drawn upward, and what that has to do with us. Let's draw this again. Okay, here is the upper story and the lower story. All right? And there's this central bar that runs in between. Now, in this room is the table of showbread. The table of showbread looks like this. And it has a bar, 2 bars that you carry it in that are right here, right underneath the top of it. And that bar is never taken out. So literally, this sits in here like this with this bar. But symbolically, it's right here. Sticking up just a little bit and then hanging down here. That's the table of showbread. Now over here is the altar of incense, which is 1 cubit with its bar. Inside here is the Ark of the Covenant, just like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. This bar is down at the bottom, and it sticks up here like this with the angels on it. So this is a ladder to heaven. These are stair steps, symbolically. No one disagrees with this, folks. If you haven't heard it before, it's okay. But you come to the altar, and then you make a step up to here, and up to here, and up to here. It's vertical. This is the ladder to heaven. This is a version of what Jacob saw as a ladder to heaven. Now the priests who are inside here are dressed in white robes, and they are dressed in wings. That's what their garments are called, because they're symbolic angels. Angels ascend and descend from heaven to earth, and these priests are moving back and forth between the top of the altar, the top of the mountain, and the people who are out here. People can't get here, and then they move in here. They go up and down. That's what priests do, because priests are angels. You say, is that right? Yeah, it is. Okay? Priests are called angels in the Bible. The word messenger is the word angel. So it says a priest is a messenger of the Lord, a priest is the angel of the Lord. You say, well, did the Jews understand this? Yes, the Jews understood this. You read Ecclesiasticus or the Wisdom of Ben Sirach, you read the Second Temple literature, it will talk about how the priests are angels that fly around inside inside the heavens, symbolic heavens, bringing messages from God and taking offerings back up to God. So it's vertical, there's vertical motion, there's east-west and north-south motion, and these things are pure motions. The tabernacle is built exactly east and west, so that at the vernal equinox, if you opened it up, the sun would shine right in straight through here. And it's also at the autumnal equinox, when the sun is exactly in the east. As it comes up, the sunlight would go right through. Now, does it have anything to say to you about how you build your church? Well, maybe it does. We live in the new covenant, and now what happens? For the very first time, we start moving out here. The Roman Empire is over here, and all of Paul's journeys and all of the book of Acts consists, after we meet the Ethiopian eunuch in the south, and a little bit of going up to the north to Caesarea, all of a sudden we're moving west. We are pushed through. And now we're coming back the other way. Paul makes journeys back to Jerusalem. He's making a journey eastward. So whereas in the Old Testament, God's throne, I drew this wrong, God's throne is over here in the east, in the west, and we're looking westward to the throne. In the new covenant, the symbolism is we are looking back to the east. That's why this wall in the church is called the Eastern Wall. You all are facing east because the direction you face is to Jerusalem, to the east. Do you have to do it that way? No. But that's the way the church has done it, and we call this the Eastern Wall, and we call that the Western Wall. You come in moving to the east because you're moving in the opposite direction as people in the Old Testament were moving. Now, historically, churches have been built just like the tabernacle was in terms of pure east and west. It's as if we say to the rest of society, you know, you can have all these roads wandering all around, but we're going to build a church perfectly oriented east and west, north and south. We're going to establish something here in the middle of your community. Now, we don't do that anymore, okay? If the road happens to be going this way, we build our church right along so it faces the road. We don't worry about it. And so we say symbolically west and east if we want to talk about the inside of the church. But there was a time, and I think it's worth thinking about, when the church said, no, we don't conform to society. Society makes its roads go this way and every which way. But when we build a church, by George, it's going to be east and west and north and south, regardless of what the roads do. And sometime around Easter, when the sun comes up in the east, it's going to come straight into the church. It's a thought. That's the way in which the church says we take dominion over and affirm that we're in charge of the society rather than the society being in charge of us. It's interesting how much the Bible does with this. It's not a necessity, but it's an interesting thing to follow out, and the church historically has done it. The Greek Orthodox Church is building a church in my town right now, and it's right along the highway, and it's completely catty-cornered to the highway. And the reason is they're building it on a true east-west, north-south axis. So it looks kind of strange. All the other churches are lined facing the highway, and in this one, it's like this. Well, one other thing we need to say about the coming of the new covenant. The geographical center of the temple of society, of the place of worship, is the ladder to heaven. I just discussed that. See, when Jacob sees the ladder to heaven, he's not seeing one of these ladders, okay? He's not seeing this. The ladder to heaven that he sees does not look like this, all right? The ladder to heaven that he sees looks like this. Okay, it's the true Tower of Babel. Now, we're used to pyramids that are nice and smooth, but most pyramids were not smooth. Most pyramids look like this. Okay, that's what he saw. Okay, ladder to heaven. And I just showed you that the tabernacle has that form, symbolically. All right? So ladder to heaven. Now this is at the exact center of the society. Wherever that is, that's where the society is. So when we came out of Egypt, here's the ladder to heaven here. And then right around it are the Levites, and the priests are here. And then you've got the 12 tribes right here, 3 on a side. And then outside of that is the mixed multitude. The whole world, this is a new heavens and a new earth that is made at Sinai. And then that new heavens and earth moves across the wilderness into the land of Canaan and pushes out the old heaven and earth and establishes that new heaven and earth in that land. That's what's happening. I'll say that again. This is the new heavens and earth. Okay? This is the ladder to heaven. These are the heavens right here. And this is the mountaintop right here. Portable Sinai that you can take with you and has the cloud on it. And you can draw near in here and arrange around under the priests and Levites and God's holy people and then the ordinary people. This is the whole world. This is a new heavens and a new earth restored. And that new heavens and new earth, that whole package, then makes this journey through the wilderness. And there's a whole chapter devoted to the order of the march, which is in it's in Numbers 9 or 10. I think it's in Numbers 10. Yes, Numbers 10. It tells you the whole order of the march. As this new heavens and new earth moves across the wilderness and into the land of Canaan, and then the hornets drive out the Canaanites, and then the warriors drive them out, and the old heavens and earth are replaced by a new one which moves in and takes it over. That's the picture. That's the picture for us. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Okay? We are the bride of Christ, so we're like the woman in Proverbs 31. We see a field and we buy it. All right? And these pagans out there, well, time to buy them and bring them under Christ's rule. Like in Iraq. Let's just go over there and outlaw Islam and impose Christianity. That would be better for those people. Certainly be better for them 100 years from now. That may sound just a little bit radical, but hey, when in Rome, be radical. When in New England, you can be as radical as you want. I can come here and say all kinds of things. Think about it. Well, now, that's the navel of the world. In Ezekiel, it's called the belly button of the earth. The navel of the world is in Jerusalem. The center of the body of the human race is at this center. Okay? And then when Jerusalem is destroyed, you hit somebody in their solar plexus right here. They fall apart. See? So in Zephaniah it says when Jerusalem is destroyed, then the next thing is you go north, south, east, and west. Judgment will go in these four directions in Zephaniah chapter 2. Ezekiel does the same thing. Ezekiel gets word that the city has been attacked, and then he says all the other nations are going to fall apart as well. You hit the center and the rest falls apart. All right, I hope you're beginning to think. North, south, east, west, up, down. Get into this mindset here. Well, now look, you get into this mindset and you live with this for 1,500 years, and now I'm here to tell you this is over. Because wherever two or three are gathered together, that's the belly button of the world. That's the navel of the world. That's where heaven and earth touch each other. This is the ladder to heaven. Because we no longer have to go by steps up to heaven. There are no longer degrees of distance from God. There are no longer degrees of holiness. There's no longer a hierarchy of architecture where only certain people can go here and only certain people can go there. Nope. We are in union with Christ, and where is Jesus? At the right hand of the Father, in the Holy of Holies, in the throne room. And if you're in union with Him, that's where you are. Now in the Old Testament, only the priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and that was just once a year, only the high priest. The ordinary priest could go into the holy place, that outer room, never go into the Holy of Holies. Levites and ordinary people, they could never go into there at all. If you were not clean, you couldn't come into the altar sanctuary and go to the altar. Gentiles could. Believing Gentiles were free to come near. But that's as far as they could near. You couldn't touch the altar. Touch the altar, those Levites shoot you with an arrow, tie a rope to your leg, and drag you out so they wouldn't have to touch your body. Okay? And if they didn't do it, God would toast you like He toasted Nadab and Abihu. It's not a smart idea to bust into God's holy places. But now, it's all different. We don't have degrees of holiness. We are all total holy, super holy, in union with Christ, and we come into the very throne room of God. Heaven touches the earth when the church comes together. Now you can pray at other times, and you have access to God through the Holy Spirit at home and in your car and wherever else in the Bible studies. But Paul says in Corinthians, when you come together, and he makes a stress on that, there is something special about that God meets with His people in a special way. And we call that special worship. This church, and that church, and that church over there, and that church over there, each one of them is the center of the world. No longer the Garden of Eden, the center of the world. No longer Shiloh, or Shechem, or Jerusalem, or even Antioch. Now, wherever the church exists, that's the crossroads of north, south, east, west, up, and down. The center of that axis of the world is here not now. This is just a building right now. But tomorrow morning, starting at 10:30? At 11? All right. When the day of the Lord starts. During the day of the Lord event, from 11, since I'm preaching from 11 to 2, this will be the center of the world. This will be where east, west, north, south, up and down intersect with each other, and where you can control everything, because you have access to Jesus and he controls everything. You think a tsunami would be a good idea? You say, we'd like a tsunami, please. Jesus punches the tsunami button or the earthquake button. He's in charge. He brings these things. It's his world. You know, if a hurricane wipes out my town, it was Jesus who sent it. That's what it means for him to be the king. We try to pretend that's not so, but it is so. We should be a little bit nervous about that. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, so let's have some fear. Now, what is at this crossroads? What is at this center of the world where the four rivers come together? Why do we use a cross shape? Yeah, we think that the cross shape in the church comes because Jesus was crucified on a cross. And the Roman soldiers, they used to go around and they would dig up trees and they would plane them down into telephone poles. Then they would dig a big hole, and every time they crucified somebody, they would make one of these telephone poles and put it in the ground and nail the guy onto it. That's not what they usually did. You know, if there were any trees around, they'd use the trees. Why go to all that trouble? You have a cross piece. That's the cross. And Jesus, the New Testament says he was nailed to a tree, doesn't it? Now we say, oh, tree means cross. What we think of as a cross. I think it means a tree. I think it means he was crucified. I mean, I can't die. I'm not going to die for this. Okay. Everything else I've said, I won't die for much of it. Okay. But I think he was crucified on the Mount of Olives, and, you know, here's a tree, and they nailed this cross piece up here, and he was nailed to that. To symbolize that, we can have one of these. That's okay. But the primary symbol is, and of course, Jesus is crucified there, and there's a red one out. There is blood here on his head, on his hands, and on his feet. And then out of the center of his body, a river of blood flows after he's cut in the side. Now this is just exactly like the tabernacle and the temple. Okay. This creates this north, south, east, west, up, down, in between heaven and earth. Heaven, earth, in between. All of this stuff is coming to its fullness here. But this cross shape is more fundamental than that. Four rivers come out of Egypt. Four horns of the altar. An intersection of crossroads. And what do you find at crossroads in the ancient world? What? In your house, you might have one of these furry things that purrs. Where does he like to go? Where he can see in every direction. Okay, that's where he hangs out. At the top of the stairs, where he can see up and down the aisle and down the stairs, because he's the Sphinx.